They told us the era of American strength was over, that we were a nation in decline, too paralyzed by bureaucracy and internal fighting to make the bold moves that change history. They told us that the dictators of the world could sleep soundly, safe behind their borders, knowing that Washington was too timid to act. But last night, under the cover of darkness, the world changed in a heartbeat, and the silence was shattered not by a politician's speech, but by the boots of American operators on the ground in Caracas. We are talking about Operation Absolute Resolve, a mission so audacious, so unprecedented, that it has left the entire geopolitical chessboard in shambles. You are going to want to stay with me until the very end of this video, because what we are uncovering isn't just a military win, it is a fundamental shift in how power works in this country. We are going to look at why the FBI, an agency designed for domestic law enforcement, was leading a charge on foreign soil, and why the establishment in Congress is absolutely losing their minds right now. If you want to understand the real story behind the headlines and what this means for the future of our republic, you are in the right place. Imagine the scene in Venezuela, a country once the jewel of South America, now reduced to rubble and despair by decades of socialist mismanagement and tyranny under Nicholas Maduro. For years, we have watched as the people there starved, as liberty was extinguished, and as adversaries like Russia and China used that nation as a foothold in our own hemisphere. We were told sanctions were working, we were told to be patient, but patience has a limit, and it seems that the current administration decided that the clock had finally run out. The news broke in the early hours of the morning, confusing reports at first, rumors of helicopters over the presidential palace, whispers of a high-value target being secured. But when the dust settled, the reality was more shocking than any Tom Clancy novel could ever hope to be. Nicholas Maduro, the man who thought he was untouchable, was in American custody, bound for New York to face justice. But here is where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming, and it is the detail that has every insider in the Beltway whispering nervously. This wasn't just the Navy SEALs or Delta Force kicking down the door, which is what we have come to expect from American power projection. No, the tip of the spear in Operation Absolute Resolve was the FBI, specifically their hostage rescue team. Now, pause for a second and think about what that means for the rule of law and the separation of powers. We have never seen the Federal Bureau of Investigation used like a foreign expeditionary force to topple a regime, and you have to ask yourself, who made that call? All roads lead back to one man, a figure who has become a lightning rod for controversy and a hero to those who want to see the system shaken up, FBI Director Kash Patel. Patel is not your typical bureaucrat. He doesn't play by the polite rules of the cocktail circuit in DC, and he certainly doesn't ask for permission from the people who have spent 40 years getting nothing done. By deploying the FBI's elite tactical unit directly into a combat zone to extract a foreign head of state, Patel has effectively rewritten the playbook on American law enforcement. He has turned a domestic agency into a global player, and while the results speak for themselves, the implications are absolutely staggering. This is the kind of bold, decisive action that many of us have been waiting for, a sign that America is done leading from behind. However, it also opens a Pandora's box of legal questions that the Democrats and even some establishment Republicans are going to use to attack this administration. If the FBI can operate like the military in Venezuela, where does their jurisdiction end? Before we dive deeper into the constitutional crisis this might trigger, I want to hear from you. Do you think it was right to send in the FBI to get the job done? Or should this have been left to the military? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and if you believe in restoring American strength, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so we can keep bringing you the truth. Let's get back to the operational details, because what happened on the ground was nothing short of a tactical masterpiece, regardless of what the lawyers say. The Hostage Rescue Team, or HRT, is known as the domestic equivalent of SEAL Team 6, trained for the absolute worst-case scenarios on American soil. Sending them to Caracas wasn't just a retrieval mission. It was a statement that the long arm of American justice has no borders. Usually, when the FBI goes abroad, they are there to pick up a prisoner after the local authorities have done the heavy lifting, acting more like marshals than soldiers. But Operation Absolute Resolve was different. This was a kinetic operation, a direct action raid where agents were pulling triggers and securing perimeters in a hostile capital city. This effectively blurs the line between law enforcement and warfare in a way we haven't seen since the days of the OSS. Critics are already screaming from the rooftops that this was illegal, that the Posse Comitatus Act and various intelligence statutes prevent domestic agencies from acting as a shadow army. They are saying that Kash Patel is running a private war, bypassing the Pentagon brass who might have slow-walked or leaked the mission. And let's be honest, the element of surprise was the only reason this worked. We all know that if this plan had gone through the usual committees in Congress, if it had been briefed to the gang of 8 weeks in advance, Maduro would have been on a plane to Havana before our guys even fueled up the jets. The administration knew that the only way to get this done was to keep the circle tight, cut out the leakers, and strike hard. It was a gamble of the highest order, risking not just American lives but the stability of the entire region. Now, the fallout is beginning to settle, and the geopolitical map is being redrawn in real time. Venezuela is currently a vacuum of power, with various factions claiming control, and the streets are likely chaotic as the news spreads that the dictator is gone. But while the Venezuelan people might be seeing a glimmer of hope, our adversaries are seeing red. Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have already issued blistering condemnations, warning that this sets a dangerous precedent for international relations. They are furious because they just lost a key ally, a puppet who allowed them to park their interests right in America's backyard. But their anger also stems from fear, because they see an America that is unpredictable again. For years, our enemies could calculate exactly what we would do because we were bound by so many self-imposed rules and endless debates. They knew we would sanction, we would draft a UN resolution, we would issue a sternly worded letter. They never expected the FBI director to send a tactical team to snatch a president out of his palace. This unpredictability is a weapon in itself, a return to the Reagan doctrine of peace through strength, but it comes with significant risks that we cannot ignore. If we normalize the use of the FBI for foreign regime change, we are handing a tremendous amount of power to the executive branch, power that could be abused by future administrations. It is a double-edged sword, and while we celebrate the victory today, we have to keep a watchful eye on how this tool is used tomorrow. The silence from the White House regarding Congress was deafening. They didn't ask for permission, and they barely gave a notification until the wheels were up. To the constitutional purists, this is a nightmare, a breakdown of the checks and balances that are supposed to keep us safe from tyranny. But to the average American watching the news, tired of seeing our country mocked and our enemies emboldened, it looks a lot like winning. It raises the question of what constitutes a success in the modern era. Is it strictly following every procedural norm while the world burns, or is it achieving the objective and securing the national interest? Kash Patel clearly believes in the latter, and he has the backing of a president who was elected to smash the status quo. This operation was a direct message to the deep state bureaucracy that the old way of doing things is over. Whatever you think about the methods, you cannot deny the effectiveness of the result. Maduro is in handcuffs, heading to the Southern District of New York, likely to face charges of narco-terrorism and corruption. This is justice that has been delayed for far too long. If you are enjoying this breakdown and want to support independent analysis that puts America first, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us cut through the noise of the mainstream media. Also, don't forget to drop a comment. Was Patel a hero or a rogue agent in this scenario? Let's look deeper into the reaction from the mainstream media, who are currently scrambling to find a negative angle on a clear victory for justice. You can see them struggling to reconcile their hatred for the administration with the undeniable fact that a brutal dictator has been removed. They are focusing heavily on the process rather than the outcome, obsessing over the lack of congressional oversight. They are interviewing legal scholars who are clutching their pearls, warning that the FBI has gone rogue. They are trying to paint Kash Patel as a dangerous cowboy, ignoring the fact that the agency under his leadership just pulled off one of the most sophisticated rescues in history. It is the classic disconnect between the elites in the newsrooms and the people in the heartland. The people I talk to aren't asking if the proper forms were filed in triplicate before the helicopters took off. They are asking if our boys are safe, if the bad guy is caught, and if America is safer today than it was yesterday. And by those metrics, Operation Absolute Resolve is a resounding success. However, we must also address the situation on the ground in Caracas, which is rapidly evolving into a complex puzzle. With Maduro gone, who steps in? We have a responsibility now, having decapitated the regime, to ensure that another monster doesn't just take his place. This is where the critics might have a point. The military intervention is the easy part, but the nation building, or rather, the transition of power, is where things get messy. Are we prepared to back a transitional government, or are we going to step back and let the Venezuelans sort it out? The administration has remained tight-lipped on the next phase. Russia and China aren't just going to pack up and leave. They have billions of dollars invested in Venezuela's oil and infrastructure. They will likely try to prop up a successor loyal to their interests, leading to a potential proxy conflict. This is why the involvement of the FBI is so fascinating. It frames this as a criminal matter, a police action, rather than an act of war, which complicates the response for our adversaries. If this was a US Army invasion, it would be an act of war declared against a sovereign state. But by using federal law enforcement to execute an arrest warrant, the administration is playing a savvy legal game. They are treating Maduro not as a president, but as a fugitive criminal, stripping him of his diplomatic legitimacy. This distinction is crucial, and it's a level of strategic thinking that we haven't seen in a long time. It forces the world to defend a criminal rather than a head of state. It puts Russia and China in the awkward position of defending a drug trafficker. But make no mistake, the precedent is set. If the FBI can go into Venezuela, can they go into Mexico to get the cartels? Can they go into the Middle East? This expansion of domestic law enforcement power is a genie that will be very hard to put back in the bottle. For the conservatives who have spent years worrying about the weaponization of the FBI against American citizens, seeing that power turned outward is a relief, but also a reminder of the agency's capabilities. It is a moment of cognitive dissonance for many of us who want a limited government but also a strong national defense. We cheer the outcome, but we must remain vigilant about the means. The logistical precision of the HRT in this operation cannot be overstated. Operating in a non-permissive environment without the full footprint of the US military is incredibly risky. It speaks to the high level of training and the aggressive new doctrine being pushed by Director Patel. He is transforming the Bureau into a force that can project power, not just investigate crimes after the fact. This proactive stance is what scares the establishment. They prefer a reactive America, one that apologizes and seeks consensus. Operation Absolute Resolve was about asking for forgiveness, not permission, and that is a language that the dictators of the world understand very well. As we continue to unpack this story, we need to look at the domestic reaction from the president's political opponents. You can bet that hearings will be scheduled, subpoenas will be issued, and there will be a grand show of moral outrage in the Senate. They will try to turn this victory into a scandal. They will argue that the president has usurped the war powers of Congress. They will argue that Patel is out of control. But they will have a hard time selling that narrative to the American public when the images of a liberated Venezuela start flooding the screens. This is the battle for the narrative that is happening right now. It is a battle between those who believe in bold action and those who believe in endless process. And right now, bold action is winning. The question remains, is this the new normal? Are we entering an era where the lines between police and military, between domestic and foreign, are permanently blurred? And is that necessary to survive in a world that is becoming increasingly dangerous? We are going to take a short break, but when we come back, we will discuss exactly what Russia and China might do next, and how this operation impacts your safety here at home. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below. We read every single one of them. Duo de la fan tu quokich ban. Teep tucdi salvau cac kai teachia din quok.kitch. Fan tixafan no quajoy tin hoa Washington va li du tai suraquandoi li by gatsang mot ben trongchen dich nay. Let's take a moment to visualize the sheer operational complexity of what went down in the dark skies over Caracas, because the media is glossing over the tactical brilliance to focus on the politics. We aren't talking about a standard arrest warrant served in the suburbs. This was a high-stakes infiltration into one of the most hostile environments on the planet. The FBI hostage rescue team had to navigate a sovereign nation's airspace, bypass air defense systems that were likely manned by Russian or Cuban advisors, and land right on top of the target without triggering a massive firefight. It requires a level of precision that, frankly, most people didn't know the FBI possessed, and it shatters the perception that they are just guys in suits investigating white-collar crime. This was a message sent directly to every cartel boss and dictator who thinks distance equals safety. There is no safe harbor when America decides to act. The decision to use the HRT instead of the Delta Force or SEAL Team 6 is the single most controversial aspect of this entire affair, and we need to understand the why behind it. The prevailing theory among insiders is that the White House has completely lost faith in the Pentagon's ability to keep a secret. We have seen time and time again, from the Afghanistan withdrawal to the Ukraine crisis, that the upper echelons of our military leadership are more concerned with leaking to the press and playing politics than winning wars. If this mission had been routed through the standard Joint Chiefs of Staff channels, the likelihood of a leak would have skyrocketed, endangering the lives of our operators and dooming the mission before it began. By keeping this strictly within the Department of Justice and utilizing the FBI's elite tier, the administration effectively bypassed the woke generals who might have slow-walked the order. Kash Patel, a loyalist who understands the swamp better than anyone, was the perfect instrument for this maneuver because he operates with a tight circle of trust. This wasn't just about catching Maduro. It was about proving that the executive branch can function effectively without the bloated, leaking bureaucracy of the Defense Department weighing it down. It is a stinging rebuke to the military-industrial complex, and you can bet the generals are fuming in the earring of the Pentagon right now. Of course, this bypass has ignited a firestorm on Capitol Hill that is threatening to consume the news cycle for weeks to come. The Democrats are already drafting articles of impeachment, claiming that using domestic law enforcement for military objectives is a high crime. They are citing the spirit, if not the letter, of the Posse Comitatus Act, arguing that the FBI has no business projecting power outside of US borders in this manner. They are ignoring the fact that the FBI has had a global presence for decades, usually in a support role, but they are terrified because the support role just became the lead role. What we are witnessing is the classic Washington two-step, where the establishment feigns outrage over procedure to cover up their embarrassment over results. Where was this outrage when the previous administrations were using the FBI to spy on political campaigns or label concerned parents as domestic terrorists? Suddenly, when the agency is used to actually take down a foreign enemy of the United States, everyone in DC becomes a strict constitutional scholar. It is hypocrisy of the highest order, and it reveals that their true loyalty lies with the preservation of the bureaucratic state, not with the success of American interests. If you are sick and tired of watching politicians protect their own power while our country's reputation suffers, go ahead and smash that like button and share this video. We need to wake people up to the reality that the real battle isn't just in Venezuela. It is right here in the halls of Congress. Let's dig deeper into the legal loophole that Director Patel likely exploited to authorize this mission without triggering the War Powers Act. Since Maduro has been indicted in the United States on charges of narco-terrorism, technically, this was a law enforcement operation to apprehend a fugitive, not a military invasion to topple a government. It is a distinction without a difference to the people on the ground in Caracas, but in the courtrooms of Washington, it is a brilliant legal maneuver. It frames the narrative around crime and punishment rather than war and peace, making it much harder for the international community to defend Maduro without looking like they support drug trafficking. This legal strategy also highlights the administration's contempt for the traditional diplomatic protocols that have failed us for so long. For years, the State Department urged caution, telling us that we had to negotiate with Maduro, that we had to offer him off-ramps and concessions. Operation Absolute Resolve took all those diplomatic briefing papers and threw them in the trash. It proved that sometimes the Gordian knot doesn't need to be untied with delicate fingers. It needs to be cut with a sword. However, we cannot ignore the dangerous game of chicken we are now playing with the oversight committees in the House and Senate. The intelligence committees are demanding immediate briefings, and they are going to ask the hard questions about who authorized the rules of engagement. If an FBI agent had been killed, or if they had accidentally caused mass civilian casualties, the administration would be hanging by a thread today. Success has 1,000 fathers, but failure is an orphan, and right now, everyone is claiming credit because the gamble paid off. But imagine the alternative timeline where the helicopters crashed in a Venezuelan jungle, reminiscent of the failed hostage rescue in Iran under Carter. The media would be calling for the president's resignation, and the credibility of American power would be shattered beyond repair. This is why the courage to give the go order cannot be understated. It requires a leader willing to bet their entire legacy on the competence of their people. It stands in stark contrast to the leadership by committee that usually paralyzes Washington. The reaction from the rank-and-file agents within the FBI is another story that isn't getting enough coverage. For years, the morale at the Bureau has been in the gutter, with field agents feeling betrayed by the politicization of their leadership at the headquarters. This mission, however, has likely sent a surge of pride through the tactical divisions, reminding them that they are still capable of heroic feats. It might just be the catalyst needed to rehabilitate the image of the FBI in the eyes of the conservative public, provided they stop targeting Americans and start targeting actual bad guys. We also have to consider the intelligence failure of our adversaries, specifically Cuban intelligence, which is notoriously effective and deeply embedded in Venezuela. How did the US plan and execute this without Havana tipping off Maduro? It suggests that our counterintelligence capabilities have improved drastically, or that we have turned key figures within Maduro's inner circle. The paranoia inside the remaining regime members must be off the charts right now, wondering who sold them out to the Americans. This brings us back to the role of Kash Patel, who is quickly becoming the most consequential FBI director since J. Edgar Hoover, though hopefully with more integrity. He understands that in the modern world, information is the primary weapon, and he likely used a combination of cyber warfare and human intelligence to blind the Venezuelan defenses. This hybrid warfare approach, blending law enforcement authority with military-grade tactics, is the future of conflict. The days of massive tank battles are being replaced by surgical strikes and information dominance. But here is the catch that the mainstream media is desperate to find. Was there any deal made with Russia or China to look the other way? It seems unlikely given their public statements, yet in the world of realpolitik, anything is possible. Perhaps the silence of the Russian air defense systems wasn't incompetence, but a calculated decision by Moscow to cut their losses on a failing investment. If that is true, it means the geopolitical landscape is shifting even faster than we realized. The Democrats are going to try to spin this as a reckless cowboy act that endangers our national security by provoking nuclear powers. They will bring out the experts from the think tanks who will wring their hands and talk about stability. But we have to ask ourselves, was the status quo in Venezuela stable? Millions of refugees fleeing, a hub for Iranian terrorists, a distribution center for cocaine flooding our streets. That was the stability the experts were protecting. Sometimes, you have to break the furniture to clean the house, and that is exactly what happened last night. The disruption is the point. It forces our enemies to recalibrate and puts them on the defensive. For too long, America has been the reactive power, responding to the provocations of others. Operation Absolute Resolve marks a return to being the proactive power, the one that sets the tempo of global events. As we move forward, the legal battles in New York where Maduro will be tried are going to be a circus of their own. His defense team will undoubtedly argue that his arrest was an illegal kidnapping, a violation of international law and sovereign immunity. This will be the next battleground, the weaponization of the US court system against foreign leaders. If the courts rule that the arrest was valid, it opens the door to indicting and snatching any dictator who crosses the line. This creates a terrifying prospect for the tyrants of the world, but also a heavy burden for the United States. We are effectively engaging in the role of global policeman, judge, and jury, a role that many conservatives are wary of. We want a strong America, but we don't necessarily want to be responsible for policing the entire planet. The balance between America first and world police is delicate, and this operation walks right on the razor's edge. The coming days will be filled with leaks from the enraged bureaucracy, trying to undermine the narrative of success. You will start hearing anonymous sources claiming that the mission was a near disaster, or that the president was unstable during the process. This is the standard playbook for the deep state when they get cut out of the loop: destroy the reputation of the people who actually got the job done. We have to be smart enough to recognize these attacks for what they are: the death throes of a system that is losing its grip on power. Furthermore, we must address the financial implications of this operation and the subsequent rebuilding of Venezuela. Are American taxpayers going to be on the hook for bailing out the Venezuelan economy now that we broke the regime? The "you break it, you buy it" rule of foreign policy is a trap we have fallen into in Iraq and Afghanistan. We need assurances from this administration that we are not about to embark on another trillion-dollar nation-building exercise. Our interest should be strictly limited to national security, removing the threat, securing the border, and ensuring no foreign adversaries set up shop. We cannot afford to send billions in aid to Caracas while our own infrastructure is crumbling and our veterans are homeless. This is where the America First movement must draw a hard line in the sand. We support the strike, but we do not support the blank check. The silence from the vice president is also notable. Usually, they are front and center to claim credit, but in this case, the spotlight is entirely on the president and Director Patel. It suggests a consolidation of power within a very small circle, which is efficient for decision-making but dangerous for continuity of government. It reinforces the idea that this is a personal victory for the president's doctrine, rather than an institutional victory for the US government. As the sun rises over a leaderless Venezuela, the people there are waking up to a future that is uncertain but finally free of the man who starved them. The images of crowds taking to the streets, tearing down posters of Maduro, will be powerful propaganda for freedom. But we must remember that power abhors a vacuum, and the race is on to see who fills it. Will it be a pro-American Democrat, or another strongman waiting in the wings? The FBI's role in this doesn't end with the extraction. They are likely securing evidence from Maduro's palaces, computers, documents, ledgers, that will implicate powerful people all over the world. This might be the real reason the establishment is panicking. What did Maduro know, and who did he pay off? If the FBI now possesses the black book of Venezuelan corruption, there are a lot of politicians in DC and Europe who are not sleeping well tonight. The potential for blackmail, for leverage, and for exposing global corruption is immense. This operation might not just be about Venezuela. It might be about draining the global swamp. Imagine if the evidence leads back to illicit funding of US political campaigns or kickbacks to European leaders. That is the kind of leverage that changes the world order without firing another shot. So, while the media focuses on the legality of the raid, keep your eye on the intelligence windfall that comes from it. That is where the real story is going to be in the coming months. Operation Absolute Resolve might just be the opening move in a much larger game of 4D chess that we are only beginning to understand. While the lawyers in Washington are busy arguing over the fine print of the US Code, the real shockwaves of Operation Absolute Resolve are slamming into the walls of the Kremlin and the headquarters of the Chinese Communist Party. We have to look away from the domestic squabbles for a moment and understand the geopolitical earthquake that just happened, because this is about much more than just one dictator in a tracksuit. For the last decade, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping have looked at South America not as a neighbor to the United States, but as a playground for their own imperial ambitions. They pumped billions of dollars into propping up the Maduro regime, not out of charity, but to buy a permanent foothold in the Western Hemisphere. Last night, the United States didn't just arrest a criminal. We effectively evicted two superpowers from our backyard, and they are absolutely furious about it. The reports coming out of Moscow are indicating that Putin is convening his Security Council in an emergency session, likely trying to figure out how his sophisticated air defense systems in Venezuela failed to detect the American approach. It is a humiliation for the Russian military industry, which touts its S-400 systems as impenetrable shields against American air power. If a team of FBI operators and their support units could slip past the radar undetected, it sends a terrifying message to every other client state buying Russian weapons: your expensive toys won't save you. This operation has shattered the myth of Russian protection, proving that when the chips are down, Moscow cannot stop the United States from reaching out and touching someone. The Kremlin spokesperson is already on television calling this an act of international piracy and gangsterism. which is rich coming from a regime that invades its neighbors for sport. But the anger from Beijing is perhaps even more significant because it is driven by money and the loss of strategic resources that fuel their economy. China has effectively bought Venezuela's oil reserves through predatory loans and the Belt and Road Initiative, viewing the country as a massive gas station for their future expansion. With Maduro in handcuffs and the regime collapsing, those contracts are now worth less than the paper they are printed on. The United States now holds the keys to the largest proven oil reserves in the world, and we have the leverage to ensure that not a single drop flows to China unless it is on our terms. This is a checkmate move in the energy war, and Xi Jinping knows that his return on investment just hit zero. We are already seeing the diplomatic fallout at the United Nations in New York, where the atmosphere is reportedly toxic and verging on violent. Russia and China have called for an emergency meeting of the Security Council to condemn the United States for violating Venezuela's sovereignty. We can expect to see the usual theatrics, with ambassadors banging their fists on the table and lecturing America on morality while their own governments run concentration camps. It is a spectacle designed to isolate us, to make America look like the aggressor in the eyes of the so-called global community. But here is the hard truth that the globalists hate to admit. The UN is a toothless tiger that exists primarily to allow dictators to vent. The American ambassador needs to walk into that chamber, look them dead in the eye, and exercise the veto power with a smile. We do not answer to a committee of corrupt bureaucrats in New York. We answer to the Constitution and the American people. This administration understands that international law has become a shackle used to restrain democracies while tyrants do whatever they please. By ignoring the UN and acting unilaterally, we have reminded the world that the United States is still the only nation that matters when it comes to hard power. Let them pass their resolutions and issue their condemnations. It won't unlock the cell door for Nicholas Maduro. However, we must remain vigilant because an animal is most dangerous when it is cornered and humiliated. Intelligence sources are warning that Russia might respond asymmetrically, perhaps by escalating tensions in Eastern Europe or launching cyber attacks against our infrastructure. They cannot fight us directly in our hemisphere, so they will try to hit us where they think we are vulnerable. This is where the FBI's involvement becomes critical again, as the Bureau must pivot from the raid to defending the homeland against the inevitable retaliation. We need to be prepared for internet outages, banking disruptions, or disinformation campaigns designed to sow chaos in our streets. China, on the other hand, plays a longer game and might try to weaponize their economic ties, threatening to dump US treasuries or restrict supply chains. But the economic reality is that they need us more than we need them, especially with their own economy teetering on the brink of collapse. This operation has exposed the fragility of the anti-American alliance. They talk a big game about a multipolar world, but they crumble when confronted with decisive American action. It is a lesson in deterrence. Weakness invites aggression, but strength commands respect. If you believe that America should never apologize for protecting its interests and securing its neighborhood, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. We are tracking the global reaction minute by minute, and we are not going to sugarcoat the threats we face. Also, leave a comment below telling us if you think the US should withdraw from the UN entirely. It is a conversation we need to have. Let's turn our attention back to the region, specifically to countries like Cuba and Nicaragua, who are watching the fall of their ally with absolute terror. The regime in Havana has survived for 60 years by being a thorn in America's side, but they just watched their biggest benefactor get snatched in the middle of the night. The psychological impact on the Cuban leadership cannot be overstated. They are realizing that the shield of sovereignty is no longer a guarantee of safety. We might see a sudden willingness from these rogue regimes to negotiate, or we might see them clamp down even harder on their own people out of paranoia. The ripple effect is also being felt by the drug cartels in Mexico and Colombia, who used Venezuela as a safe haven for their aircraft and shipments. Operation Absolute Resolve has effectively burned down their logistical hub, disrupting the flow of narcotics that poisons our communities. This is the angle that the mainstream media often ignores, the direct link between the Maduro regime and the fentanyl crisis killing our kids. By taking out the head of the snake, we have disrupted a major supply chain of death. It is a victory for every American family that has lost a loved one to the opioid epidemic. But the liberal media will never give credit where it is due. Instead, they will focus on the instability this causes in the drug trade, as if the previous stability was something to cherish. They will interview experts who claim that this will lead to more violence as factions fight for control of the routes. While that may be true in the short term, the long-term benefit of removing a state sponsor of narco-terrorism is undeniable. We are taking the fight to the enemy rather than waiting for the drugs to cross our border. There is also a fascinating silence from our European allies, the traditional NATO partners who usually rush to issue joint statements. They are caught in a bind, secretly relieved that a dictator is gone but publicly terrified of the precedent it sets for international norms. They rely on the illusion of a rules-based order to maintain their relevance because they lack the military capacity to enforce anything on their own. The United States has just demonstrated that we are done asking for permission from Brussels or Berlin to secure our own hemisphere. This might cause friction in the transatlantic alliance, but it is a necessary friction to realign the relationship based on reality. We are entering a new era of realpolitik, where results matter more than feelings and alliances are transaction-based. The Europeans need to understand that the American taxpayer is no longer interested in subsidizing their defense while they criticize our methods. If they want a seat at the table, they need to bring something other than moral superiority and empty promises. Operation Absolute Resolve is a wake-up call for the West. Either get serious about the threats we face, or get out of the way. As the UN Security Council meeting approaches, we should expect a circus of hypocrisy, with the Russian ambassador likely accusing the US of colonialism. It is a tired old script, but it still plays well in the global south and among the academic elites in our own universities. We need to be ready to counter this narrative with the truth, that freeing a people from a starving tyranny is the ultimate act of liberation. We didn't go there to conquer. We went there to clean up a mess that was spilling over into our home. The question now is whether the administration has the stomach to withstand the diplomatic heat that is coming. There will be threats of sanctions against US officials, there will be sternly worded letters, and there will be protests organized by leftist groups in major cities. But if the president holds the line, if he refuses to apologize, this storm will pass, and the world will adjust to the new reality. Strength is a language that transcends borders, and for the first time in a long time, America is speaking it fluently. We also need to consider the domestic political angle of this foreign policy crisis. The Democrats are caught in a trap of their own making. If they side with the UN and condemn the operation, they look like they are siding with Maduro and Putin against American law enforcement. If they support the operation, they have to give credit to a president they despise and an FBI director they fear. They are currently paralyzed, issuing vague statements about monitoring the situation, which is code for "we have no idea what to do." This paralysis is good for the country because it allows the professionals to finish the job without political interference. The focus now must remain on the transition in Venezuela and ensuring that the vacuum isn't filled by another enemy. We need to identify the pro-American elements within the Venezuelan military and society and support them aggressively. This is not the time for half measures or hesitation. We broke the regime. Now we must ensure the replacement is an ally. If you want to see America continue to lead with strength and stop apologizing to dictators, hit that subscribe button right now. We are building a community of patriots who understand that freedom isn't free. It requires bold action and the resolve to see it through. Leave a comment. Should the US veto the UN resolution, or should we just ignore it entirely? One final thought on the adversaries. Do not underestimate their desperation. Putin needs a win to distract from his own failings, and she needs to project strength to his internal rivals. They might try to test us in the South China Sea or the Arctic, probing for weakness. The US Navy and Air Force must be on high alert, ready to demonstrate that while the FBI can handle the snatch and grab, the full might of the American military is ready for the high-end fight. We have poked the bear and the dragon at the same time. Now we must be ready for the roar. If you turned on your television this morning expecting to see a celebration of American bravery and a victory for justice, you probably thought you tuned into a funeral by mistake. The mainstream media, the folks who reside in the Acela corridor between DC and New York, are in a state of absolute meltdown that is almost embarrassing to watch. Instead of praising the daring men of the FBI hostage rescue team who risked their lives to decapitate a narco-terrorist regime, the talking heads are clutching their pearls and asking if we were too aggressive. It is the same tired song and dance we have heard for years. Whenever America wins, the media finds a reason to tell you why it is actually a loss. They are interviewing legal experts who are more concerned with Nicholas Maduro's procedural rights than the millions of people he starved and the drugs he pushed into our neighborhoods. You have to ask yourself why the media is so uncomfortable with a clear-cut American victory. Is it because they are ideologically aligned with the socialists in South America? Or is it simply because they cannot bear to give this administration a win? I think we all know the answer. They would rather see the country fail than see this president succeed. They are already trying to spin the narrative that Operation Absolute Resolve was a distraction from domestic issues, or a reckless gamble that endangered national security. They are frantically searching for a negative angle, digging through the trash looking for anything to stain this achievement. But the American people aren't buying what they are selling anymore. We see through the gaslighting. We see a bad guy in handcuffs and our guys coming home safe, and we call that a good day. If you are tired of the media telling you to be ashamed of American strength, hit that like button right now to send them a message. Watch closely in the coming days as the narrative shifts from what happened to how it happened. The media will obsess over the lack of congressional notification, trying to turn a successful raid into a constitutional crisis. They will start throwing around words like impeachable and authoritarian, trying to convince you that enforcing the law is somehow breaking it. They are terrified because Kash Patel and the president didn't play by their rules. They didn't leak the plan to the New York Times beforehand, and they didn't ask the permission of the pundits. This secrecy is being framed as dark and nefarious, when in reality, it is called operational security, a concept the leakers in DC have forgotten. They are angry because they were cut out of the loop, rendered irrelevant in the decision-making process. For the first time in a long time, the press didn't get the scoop until the boots were on the ground, and that bruised ego is driving their negative coverage. The Democrats in Congress are currently huddled in closed-door meetings, trying to figure out their messaging strategy because they are in a massive political bind. They know that Maduro is deeply unpopular, especially among the Hispanic voters in Florida and Texas that they are desperate to win back. If they come out too hard against the raid, they look like they are defending a dictator and alienating key voting blocs. But if they support it, they validate the president's bold foreign policy and admit that his America First approach actually works. So, expect them to thread the needle by attacking the process rather than the result. You will hear Senator Schumer and others talking about the War Powers Resolution, claiming that the president overstepped his authority. They will drag administration officials up to the Hill for grueling hearings, hoping to catch someone in a perjury trap. It is all political theater designed to slow down the momentum of this victory. But this strategy is fraught with risk for them because the optics of attacking the FBI agents who pulled this off are terrible. The Democrats have spent the last few years championing the FBI when it was investigating their political opponents. Now that the FBI is doing actual law enforcement work against foreign enemies, are they going to turn on the Bureau? The hypocrisy will be on full display, and we need to be there to point it out every single time. This operation also drives a wedge between the moderate Democrats and the far-left progressive squad who openly sympathize with socialist regimes. You can bet that certain members of the House are already drafting tweets condemning American imperialism and calling for Maduro's release. This infighting is going to tear their party apart as they struggle to reconcile their radical ideology with the reality of the world. Let's talk about the border for a minute, because this operation is intimately tied to the crisis we are facing on our southern frontier. For years, Venezuela has been a primary source of migrants, people fleeing the economic collapse caused by Maduro's policies. By removing the cause of the rot, we are taking the first real step towards stabilizing that country and allowing people to return home. This raid was, in many ways, the ultimate border security operation, executed thousands of miles away from the Rio Grande. The media will never make that connection for you. They want you to think the border crisis and foreign policy are two separate buckets. But common sense tells us that if you fix the countries people are fleeing from, they stop fleeing. This administration understands that walls are necessary, but so is taking out the drivers of mass migration. If you agree that fixing the border starts with fixing the failed states to our south, please subscribe to the channel so we can keep bringing you this kind of analysis. Your subscription helps us grow and reach more patriots who are hungry for the truth. Now, consider the psychological impact this has on the cartels who control the routes into the United States. They have watched their biggest state-level partner get snatched, and they have to be wondering if they are next. The FBI has demonstrated that it has the reach and the will to go into hostile territory. This uncertainty disrupts their operations, forces them to go underground, and makes them prone to mistakes. We might see a temporary spike in violence as the power dynamics shift, but that is the price of breaking the cartel stranglehold. The experts on CNN will blame this violence on US policy, ignoring the decades of violence that their passivity allowed to fester. They prefer a quiet, managed decline over a messy, decisive victory. There is also a massive information war brewing online, with bots and trolls from Russia and China flooding social media to control the narrative. They are pushing hashtags, spreading fake videos, and trying to convince Americans that this raid was illegal or a failure. You have to be incredibly careful about where you get your news in the next few weeks because the disinformation campaign is going to be sophisticated. They will try to demoralize us, to make us question our own government success. They will circulate rumors about civilian casualties that never happened or claim that the US suffered secret losses. This is modern warfare, fought not just with guns, but with tweets and viral posts. We have to be the digital soldiers who push back with the truth. One of the most pathetic reactions has come from the Hollywood elite, many of whom have cozied up to dictators like Maduro in the past. Remember the actors and directors who flew down to Caracas to praise the socialist miracle? They are awfully quiet today, deleting their old tweets and photos. This operation has exposed the moral bankruptcy of the celebrity class who treat tyrants like rock stars while lecturing Americans on morality. It is a reminder that the culture war and the political war are one and the same. The people who hate America's history and values are the same people who are upset that we took down a communist dictator. They are invested in the narrative that America is the problem, so when America provides the solution, their worldview collapses. We are also seeing a resurgence of American swagger, a feeling we haven't had since the 1980s. There is something undeniable about seeing the good guys win, about knowing that we have the capability to do what no other nation can do. It restores a sense of national pride that has been eroded by years of apology tours and managed decline. This surge in patriotism is exactly what the left fears most because a proud America is an unconquerable America. They want you demoralized, feeling guilty for your country's past, and ashamed of its power. Operation Absolute Resolve is a direct antidote to that poison. But let's not get complacent. The counterattack from the deep state is coming, and it will be vicious. They will use their allies in the bureaucracy to leak damaging stories about the planners of this mission. They will try to destroy the careers of the men and women who made this happen to deter anyone else from trying it in the future. We have seen this playbook before with the whistleblowers who were persecuted for telling the truth. We need to demand that Congress protects the heroes of this operation, not the bureaucrats who tried to stop it. If the Republicans in the House have any spine, they will start issuing subpoenas to find out who is leaking classified information to the press to undermine the president. The sheer volume of anonymous officials quoted in the New York Times today is staggering. Who are these people? They are the permanent governing class who believe they have a divine right to rule, regardless of who wins the elections. They are fighting for their survival because they know that if this bold style of governance succeeds, their slow, expensive, and ineffective methods will be obsolete. This is a battle between the action faction and the paperwork party. The action faction just delivered a massive win, and the paperwork party is trying to bury it in red tape. It is essential that we don't let the paperwork obscure the victory. We also need to talk about the timing of this operation and what it means for the upcoming election cycle. The Democrats were hoping to run on the economy, but with inflation still biting, they are vulnerable. Now, with a major foreign policy win on the board, the Republicans have a powerful narrative of strength versus weakness. The Democrats will try to claim that the president ordered this raid just to boost his poll numbers. They will call it an wag the dog scenario, a cynical political stunt. But ask the people of Venezuela if their liberation is a stunt. Ask the families of fentanyl victims if stopping the flow is a stunt. It is a cynical argument from a party that politicizes everything from the weather to children's books. They cannot conceive of a leader acting simply because it is the right thing to do for the country. They project their own political obsession onto everything they see. As we wrap up this segment on the domestic front, I want to leave you with a challenge. Don't let the media dictate how you feel about this. Do your own research, look at the primary sources, and listen to the silence of the people who usually have so much to say. Their silence speaks volumes. It tells you they have no argument, only resentment. We are witnessing a realignment of American power, away from the unelected bureaucrats and back to the elected representatives and the people who enforce the law. It is a messy, chaotic process, but it is a beautiful thing to watch. In the next part of this series, we are going to dive into the economic war that is about to explode. We are talking about oil prices, the stock market reaction, and how China is going to try to use its debt leverage to punish us. It is going to be a bumpy ride for your 401k, but there are ways to protect yourself. So, please, leave a comment below. Do you trust the mainstream media's coverage of this raid? I think I know the answer, but let's get it on the record. And if you haven't yet, subscribe and ring that bell so you don't miss the economic breakdown coming up next. The opening bell on Wall Street this morning sounded more like an air raid siren to the globalists who have bet everything on the managed decline of American power. We are seeing massive volatility in the markets, with the Dow Jones swinging wildly as traders try to price in the sudden collapse of a major oil-producing regime. The financial elites, the folks who value stability over freedom, are panic selling because their spreadsheets didn't account for an America that actually fights back. They are terrified because Operation Absolute Resolve has kicked over the table of the global energy market, a market that has been rigged against the American consumer for decades. But while the brokers in their high-rise offices are sweating, you need to understand that this turbulence is the sound of shackles breaking. For years, we were told that we had to tolerate the Maduro regime because Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves in the world, and disrupting that flow would send gas prices to $10 a gallon. That was the lie they used to keep us paralyzed, to keep us dependent on foreign dictators for the energy that powers our cars and heats our homes. But the reality is that under socialist management, Venezuela's oil production had already cratered, and what little was left was being shipped directly to China to pay off bad debts. By taking control of the situation, the United States has effectively reasserted its dominance over the energy security of the Western Hemisphere. It is a bold move that says we are done letting our adversaries control the thermostat of the global economy. However, we have to be realistic about the short-term pain that might come before the long-term gain, because freedom is never free. We might see a temporary spike in gas prices at the pump as the market adjusts to the uncertainty and the speculators try to make a quick buck. The media is going to scream that this is the president's fault, that his reckless cowboy diplomacy is costing you money every time you fill up your truck. Do not fall for it. This is the price of fixing a broken system that was designed to bleed us dry slowly. I would rather pay a few cents more for a few weeks to secure our energy independence for the next 50 years than continue to fund our enemies. China is the wild card in this economic poker game, and Xi Jinping has his finger hovering over the economic nuclear button. Beijing holds over $800 billion in US Treasury debt, and there are whispers that they might threaten to dump it to crash the dollar in retaliation. It is a terrifying prospect on paper, designed to make our knees knock and force us to apologize, but in reality, it is a suicide vest. If China dumps our debt, they destroy the value of their own reserves and shatter their export economy, which relies on American consumers. They are bluffing, hoping that the weak-kneed politicians in Washington will blink first, but this administration just proved it doesn't blink. We need to talk about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, which the previous administration drained to artificially lower gas prices for the midterms. That was a political crime that left us vulnerable, and now we are seeing the consequences of playing politics with national security. The new leadership must immediately announce a plan to refill the SPR, potentially with Venezuelan crude once a transitional government gets the pumps working again. This is the ultimate America First energy cycle. We secure the resource, we refine it in Texas and Louisiana, and we sell it to the world on our terms. It creates jobs here, it lowers costs here, and it cuts the Chinese out of the loop completely. The reactions from OPEC, specifically Saudi Arabia, are going to be fascinating to watch because they respect one thing above all else: strength. For the last few years, the Saudis have drifted toward Russia and China because they saw America as a declining empire led by people who didn't know how to wield power. Now, they see an American president who sends the FBI to kidnap a head of state, and you can bet the phone lines between Riyadh and Washington are burning up. They will likely fall back in line, stabilizing production to ensure they remain on the good side of the winning team. This operation wasn't just about Venezuela. It was a shot across the bow to every oil prince who thinks he can hold the American economy hostage. But let's look at the Green New Deal fanatics in our own government, the ones who are probably crying in their oat milk latties this morning. They hate this operation because it reinforces the importance of fossil fuels and American hard power, two things they have spent their lives trying to destroy. They wanted Venezuela to remain a socialist utopia, even a failed one, rather than seeing it turn into a pro-American energy powerhouse. They know that if Venezuelan oil comes back online under US supervision, the argument for their expensive, unreliable wind and solar projects gets even weaker. This is a victory for reality over ideology, for physics over fantasy. If you believe that drill, baby, drill is not just a slogan but a national security strategy, go ahead and smash that like button. We need to send a message that we want energy abundance, not the energy poverty the left is trying to force on us. And make sure you are subscribed, because the economic analysis we provide here is the stuff they won't tell you on CNBC. The ripple effects are going to hit the gold and silver markets as well, which typically surge during times of geopolitical instability. Smart investors have been hedging against the dollar for years, sensing that the debt-based system is fragile, and events like this prove them right. While I am not a financial advisor, it is common sense to see that when the world gets crazy, people run to hard assets. This operation serves as a reminder that the paper promises of politicians can evaporate overnight, but gold, land, and oil are real. We also need to consider the impact on the defense industry stocks, which are likely rallying as the market realizes the world is a much more dangerous place than we pretended. The military-industrial complex is a double-edged sword. We hate the wars, but we need the weapons to prevent them. This raid demonstrated a need for specialized equipment, stealth helicopters, and advanced surveillance tech, all of which are made by American workers. It is an economic engine that, when pointed in the right direction, protects our freedom rather than just enriching lobbyists. The Democrats are going to try to use any economic turbulence to push for price controls or more government spending, which is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. They will argue that the government needs to step in to protect consumers from the consequences of the raid, which really means more handouts and more control. We must resist this urge to let the government take over the economy every time there is a crisis. The market will settle, the supply chains will realign, and American resilience will prevail if the government just gets out of the way. There is a very real possibility that China will try to disrupt our supply chains for pharmaceuticals or rare earth minerals as a form of asymmetric retaliation. We rely on them for way too much of our critical infrastructure, a weakness that has been exposed but not fixed. Operation Absolute Resolve should be the wake-up call that we need to decouple our economy from the Chinese Communist Party immediately. We cannot be in a Cold War with a country that makes our antibiotics and our fighter jet components. It is time to bring those factories back home to Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Michigan. The labor unions, specifically the ones in the energy sector, should be cheering this move, even if their leadership is tied to the Democratic Party. Venezuelan oil is heavy crude, which is exactly what our refineries in the Gulf Coast are designed to process. Bringing that supply back online means overtime hours for American refinery workers, pipe fitters, and longshoremen. It is a direct injection of wealth into the blue-collar economy that the coastal elites completely ignore. We are watching a real-time realignment of the global economic order, shifting away from a globalist system where everyone depends on everyone, to a nationalist system where strong countries look out for themselves. The globalists told us that economic integration would prevent war, that if we traded with dictators, they would become nice. That theory died in Ukraine, and it was buried in Venezuela last night. We are realizing that trading with the enemy just funds the enemy. The fearmongers are going to talk about uncertainty as if it is the worst thing in the world, but uncertainty is simply the environment in which opportunity exists. For the savvy investor, for the prepared patriot, this is a moment to look for undervalued American assets. Betting against America has always been a losing strategy in the long run, and Operation Absolute Resolve proves that the American eagle still has talons. However, we must be wary of the Federal Reserve's reaction to this, as they might use the geopolitical shock as an excuse to pivot on interest rates. They are political creatures, despite their claims of independence, and they might try to soften the blow to help the incumbent party. We need to keep a close eye on the money supply, because if they start printing money to pay for a stabilization fund for Venezuela, inflation will roar back. We want a victory that pays for itself, not one that is put on the national credit card. As we look at the broader Latin American economy, the removal of the Maduro cancer is going to unlock massive potential for trade and growth in the region. A free Venezuela could become a major economic partner for the United States, buying our cars, our machinery, and our agricultural products. The socialists turned a wealthy country into a pauper. Capitalism and the rule of law can turn it back into a powerhouse. This is the vision of prosperity that we should be selling to the world, not the misery of redistribution. Don't let the doom and gloom of the nightly news convince you that this is an economic disaster. They are projecting their own fears. They are afraid of a world where they don't control the flow of resources. We are looking at a future where America is the energy superpower, the manufacturing hub, and the undisputed leader of the free world. It is going to be a rocky transition, but the destination is worth the journey. So, here is my question for you. Are you willing to pay a little more at the pump for a few weeks if it means destroying a socialist regime and securing our future? I think I know where true patriots stand on this. Leave a comment saying freedom is worth it if you agree. In the final part of our special report, we are going to look at the man himself, Kash Patel, and what this means for the future of the FBI and the deep state. Is he the new sheriff in town who will finally clean house? You do not want to miss this conclusion. We have arrived at the final chapter of this incredible saga, and we have to talk about the man who actually pulled the trigger on this operation, the man the establishment loves to hate, FBI Director Kash Patel. When he was appointed, the Washington swamp went into absolute convulsions, screaming that he was a partisan loyalist who would burn the Department of Justice to the ground. They called him unqualified, they called him a conspiracy theorist, and they tried to block his confirmation with every dirty trick in the book because they were terrified of what he would do. Well, Operation Absolute Resolve is exactly what they were afraid of, not because it was a failure, but because it was a spectacular success that didn't require their permission or their slow-moving committees. Patel has proven that an outsider, someone who isn't beholden to the cocktail party circuit in Georgetown, is exactly what was needed to shake the rust off the American security apparatus. This operation effectively transforms Patel from a controversial bureaucrat into a folk hero for the conservative movement, a figure who embodies the doer versus the talker. He took an agency that had tarnished its reputation by spying on churches and school board meetings and refocused it on its original purpose, hunting down the most dangerous criminals on earth. By sending the hostage rescue team to get Maduro, he sent a clear message to the rank-and-file agents that the days of political witch hunts are over and the days of kicking down doors are back. It is a morale boost that money can't buy, restoring a sense of mission to an agency that was adrift in wokeness and bureaucracy. But make no mistake, his success has put a massive target on his back, and the long knives are coming out for him now more than ever. The deep state, that permanent layer of unelected officials who think they run the country, views Patel not just as a nuisance, but as an existential threat to their power structure. They rely on the idea that things must be done a certain way, usually a way that involves endless meetings, zero accountability, and maintaining the status quo. Patel just bypassed all of that, proving that a small group of dedicated patriots can achieve more in 24 hours than the entire State Department can achieve in 24 years. They are going to leak against him. They are going to fabricate scandals. and they are going to try to force him to resign because he exposed their incompetence. We need to have his back because if they manage to take him down, they will make sure no one ever dares to challenge them again. This is the nature of the war we are in. It isn't just about Republicans versus Democrats. It is about the outsider versus the machine. The machine is designed to protect itself at all costs, and it will destroy anyone who tries to make it actually work for the American people. We saw what they did to the president during his first term, and now they are running the same playbook against his top lieutenants. But this time is different because we know their tactics, we see through their lies, and we have the results to prove that our way works. You cannot argue with a dictator in handcuffs. That is a reality that no amount of media spin can erase. If you want to see Kash Patel continue to dismantle the deep state and restore justice, you need to make your voice heard. Subscribe to this channel, share this video, and call your representatives to tell them you support the director. We cannot let them win the narrative war when we just won the actual war. Looking forward, this operation sets a new precedent for American foreign policy that is reminiscent of the teddy bear and the big stick, but with a modern twist. We are no longer going to engage in nation building where we spend trillions trying to turn Afghanistan into Switzerland, only to fail miserably. Instead, we are moving toward a model of punitive expeditions, surgical strikes designed to remove a specific threat without getting bogged down in a 20-year occupation. It is a leaner, meaner, and more efficient way to use power, prioritizing American interests and American lives above all else. This Patel doctrine, if we can call it that, is about striking fear into our enemies while keeping our own hands relatively clean. Of course, the critics will say that this approach is illegal, immoral, and dangerous, but these are the same critics who presided over the disasters of the last 2 decades. They have no moral standing to lecture anyone on foreign policy when their record is a graveyard of failure and retreat. They are afraid of this new doctrine because it requires decisiveness, a quality that is in short supply in the modern Democratic Party. They prefer strategic patience, which is just a fancy word for doing nothing while the world burns around you. We are done with patience. We are in the business of resolve. We must also consider the message this sends to the cartels and the human traffickers who have been operating with impunity on our southern border. They have always assumed that the FBI stops at the Rio Grande, that once they cross that line, they are safe in their corrupt sanctuaries. That invisible line just vanished, and every cartel boss is now looking over his shoulder, wondering if a Black Hawk helicopter is coming for him next. This psychological warfare is just as important as the kinetic operation because it forces our enemies to make mistakes. We are taking the fight to them, disrupting their supply chains, and making them feel the fear they have inflicted on us. There will undoubtedly be hearings on Capitol Hill where angry senators will demand to know who authorized this and why they weren't consulted. It will be high political theater, designed to generate sound bites for the evening news and fundraising emails for the Democrats. But watch the body language of the witnesses. Watch Patel if he testifies. He won't be apologetic, he won't be cowering. He will be defiant, and that defiance is going to electrify the country. The American people love a fighter, and they are starving for leaders who don't back down when the media mob comes for them. This is the realignment we have been waiting for, the moment when the conservative movement stops just complaining about the decline and starts actually reversing it. It is proof that we don't have to accept a world where America is the punchline of a bad joke. We have the resources, the people, and the will to be great again. We just needed the leadership to unleash it. Operation Absolute Resolve is the spark, but it is up to us to keep the fire burning. The establishment will try to frame this as a constitutional crisis to distract you from the victory, claiming the president is acting like a king. They will cite obscure statutes and twist the words of the founders to argue that saving the country is actually destroying it. It is the ultimate gaslighting operation, trying to convince you that your lying eyes are deceiving you. But we know the Constitution was not a suicide pact. It was written to empower a government to protect its citizens, not to shackle it in the face of danger. The president fulfilled his oath to protect and defend against enemies foreign and domestic, and Maduro was both. As the dust settles in Caracas and the new reality sets in, we are going to see a scramble for power that will require steady hands to manage. We cannot simply walk away now. We have to ensure that the transition leads to a government that is friendly to the United States. This is where the State Department, if they can stop crying for 5 minutes, actually has a role to play in diplomacy. We need to use our economic leverage to guide Venezuela back to democracy, not for their sake, but for ours. A stable, prosperous Venezuela means fewer migrants, more oil, and no Russian bases. But let's be honest, the hard work was done by the guys in the helmets, not the guys in the bow ties. We owe a debt of gratitude to the operators who flew into the dark, not knowing if they would come back. They are the best of us, the silent professionals who carry the weight of our freedom on their shoulders. We can never repay them fully, but we can honor them by ensuring their mission isn't tarnished by political hacks back home. This entire event is a litmus test for every politician in Washington. Do you stand with the men who got the job done, or do you stand with the bureaucrats who tried to stop them? We need to take names and remember who said what when the chips were down. The midterms are coming, and then the general election, and this should be the defining issue. We want representatives who have the guts to support absolute resolve, not absolute surrender. The globalists are going to regroup. They are going to hold their summits in Davos and Brussels to condemn this unilateralism. They will release statements signed by hundreds of intellectuals warning about the dangers of American nationalism. Let them talk. Their words are empty and their influence is waning. The people of the world are watching, and they see that the globalist emperor has no clothes. They see that when push comes to shove, it is the nation-state that matters, not the international organization. We are witnessing the end of the post-Cold War era and the beginning of the America First era, and it is going to be a bumpy ride. There will be economic shocks, there will be diplomatic tantrums, and there will be threats from our enemies. But I would rather live in a dangerous world where America is strong than a peaceful world where America is on its knees. We are reclaiming our destiny, refusing to go gently into that good night. So, as we wrap up this special report, I want to ask you to do one thing. Do not let this moment pass without action. Talk to your neighbors, talk to your family, and tell them the truth about what happened. The media is trying to bury this story under a mountain of negativity, but you are the antidote to their poison. You are the digital army that can spread the truth faster than they can suppress it. If you believe that Kash Patel is the right man for the job, leave a comment below saying "Stand with Kash." If you believe America is back, hit that like button and share this video with everyone you know. We are building a movement here, and we need every single one of you on the front line of the information war. Thank you for watching, thank you for being a patriot, and thank you for never giving up on this country. The best is yet to come, and the enemies of freedom are on the run. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and God bless the United States of America.